He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes fixed on me the way a butcher studies a slab of meat. "We're cutting your salary in half. Take it or leave it." The words landed like steel on glass, clean, deliberate, impossible to soften. I didn't blink, I didn't frown, I didn't give him what he wanted. "I understand," I said. My voice didn't crack. "When does this take effect?" "Immediately," he smirked, savoring the cruelty. I nodded once, slowly. Perfect timing. He thought it was sarcasm. He thought he'd crushed me. He thought he was the executioner and I the condemned. But inside, I was already gone, already across the street, already at the competitor's table. I let silence stretch between us, long enough for him to believe he'd won. Because men like Jim Tanner, the CEO, my wife's father, lived for dominance. The pause was my gift to him, a morsel of power he thought he'd devoured. He had no idea what I had already swallowed whole. No idea that while he smirked, I was counting the steps until the floor gave way beneath him, and I would be the one to pull the lever. It started months earlier, though I didn't recognize it then. A message on my wife's phone, late, vague, tucked between ordinary reminders. A call she silenced too quickly. The way her eyes darted when my father-in-law's name appeared. At first I dismissed it. Family business, boardroom details, father-daughter whispers. But the tone was wrong. Too gentle, too intimate. And then the shift. Her late nights suddenly multiplied. Her laughter in another room hushed when I entered. The warmth between us cooling, replaced by a rehearsed distance. I told myself it was stress, marriage fatigue, the kind of invisible cracks no one wants to admit are forming. But my chest knew better. The body recognizes betrayal before the mind dares to name it. I began to watch, quietly, carefully. Their patterns aligned in ways that made no sense. Board meetings that weren't on the calendar. Trips that coincided. Excuses rehearsed too perfectly, as if she knew I might ask. And beneath it all, the weight in my stomach that never lifted. It wasn't proof yet, only suspicion. But suspicion is a blade. And once you feel its edge, you cannot unfeel it. I started collecting fragments, phone records, hotel receipts, timelines I laid out on paper like a detective cataloging evidence no one else believed existed. I never confronted her, not once. Instead, I smiled across the dinner table, asked about her day, kissed her cheek goodnight. My silence was a disguise, and it worked. She grew careless under its cover. The more I traced, the clearer the outline became. Meetings that overlapped to the minute. Texts that coincided with his travel. A shared secrecy threaded through digital breadcrumbs. I told myself I needed certainty, not shadows. So I searched deeper. DNA tests, though not for children. No, I tested truth itself. The truth in her phone's location data. The truth in his corporate credit card charges. The truth in surveillance footage that didn't know how to lie. Each piece confirmed what my instincts had whispered. Their intimacy wasn't business. It wasn't familial loyalty. It was something else. Something they had chosen to hide. And yet, I stayed calm. Because control was my only weapon. If they ever suspected how much I knew, the game would end too soon. So I let them play. Let them smirk. Let them believe I was blind. While quietly, I tightened the noose. The final proof arrived in a sealed envelope. Photos, dates, locations. Her hand in his arm at her waist, a kiss caught at the threshold of a hotel room. There it was, truth, stripped of denial. I stared at the images until the edges blurred, until her face was no longer hers, but a mask I couldn't recognize. When she came home that night, I was waiting, at the kitchen table, envelope between us. I slid it toward her, said nothing. She opened it, and the color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no words formed. Tears hovered, fragile, waiting to fall. I didn't flinch. I didn't rage. I only asked, softly, "How long?" That broke her. The sob, the trembling hands, the collapse into apology. But it didn't move me, not anymore. I had already crossed the threshold where pain hardens into something colder, something sharper. Her confession was just noise. I already had the truth. The next morning was my annual review. Her father sitting across from me, his smirk ready, his power rehearsed. When he cut my salary in half, I didn't resist, didn't argue. I gave him the same silence I had given her. Because what he didn't know was that I'd been recruited by his greatest rival. Contract signed, position secured. Twice the pay, half the leash. I rose from the chair slowly, deliberately. "Thank you for your time," I said. He looked pleased, victorious. That pleasure lasted 3 days, until the press release hit, naming me as senior executive at the competitor he'd been bleeding clients to for years. His board turned on him, investors fled, and when my wife packed her things to follow him into exile, I let her. No rage, no pleading, only silence. Because silence is the loudest weapon of all. Now I watch from a distance, his empire crumbling, her absence nothing more than an echo. I feel nothing, not anger, not sorrow, only clarity. They thought they could dismantle me quietly, piece by piece. But betrayal is a mirror. It reflects back sharper than it was given. And in that reflection, they finally saw themselves for what they were. Not powerful, not cunning, just careless. I close the chapter without ceremony, because vengeance isn't fire, it's frost, and I have already turned to ice.